You know what they say. New year, new internet grooming scandal. Except this time, it's coming from an internet personality you wouldn't be surprised at all to hear it from. YandereDev. He's been in hot water for a while now after word got out that he was violating a few social boundaries by allowing a relationship to get a little bit too sensual between him and a 16-year-old girl on Discord. But before I dive into that, I do want to give some exposition on who YandereDev is as a person. His real name is Alex Mahan, and he's an amateur game developer who's been perpetually updating his Unity passion project for almost 10 years now. And it originally gained relevancy because a few YouTubers decided to play it once when he released a pre-alpha in like 2015. With every passing year, the game's spaghetti code just gets more cancer, and more pointless arbitrary features are stacked into the development queue, which just delays the release of the game to no end. The amount of time this game has been in development rivals some of the biggest AAA titles out there like Grand Theft Auto and Cyberpunk. And I'm not entirely sure if this is just because of a poor work ethic on his part, or if it's just because he's way in over his head and is unrealistically ambitious. There were a good amount of fans that became restless about the supposedly non-existent release of the game they had been waiting so long for. They stood by patiently for years while the game plunged deeper into development hell, so they finally took initiative into their own hands and started to release their own fan spin-offs of the game. This eventually got the attention of YandereDev, but instead of being flattered that his game was inspirational enough to start a subgenre of people that try to make their own spin-off games, he instead chose to have a hysterical meltdown about it and threatened not only legal action against them, but threatened to end his own life as well if they didn't stop development. Meaning this half-baked, terribly coded Unity game from a decade ago that was trendy on YouTube for like a week is his only reason to live. Which is weird because for something that means so much to him, he sure does spend an awful lot of time not working on it. I mean, realistically, if you were given a decade of time, a ton of collective support from fan donations, and volunteers who work on the game for you for free, assuming you had a reasonable work ethic and a head on your shoulders, you should be able to make much more efficient use of that time and those resources, and should have probably had the game released for a few years now. In fact, it seems like these developers were able to render a nearly fully finished game in a fraction of the time it took for YandereDev to release a demo of his. And despite most of them looking like your typical Unity posts, they still managed to look and play better than Yandere Simulator, which is probably why it struck such a nerve with him and why he viewed them as being an existential threat to his game. His justification for pressuring these spin-off developers with sewer slide baiting and legal action was that he thought they were stealing his hard-earned assets that he definitely made himself and totally weren't just bought from the Unity store. He claims that the vast majority of assets used in Yandere Sim were original, and that these spin-off games were just a collage of those assets, when this just simply isn't true. There were a ton of assets in fan games like Lovesick, which were either bought from the Unity store like YandereDev did for a large portion of his assets, or they were handmade by volunteers who were working alongside the developers of these games. I saw an interview with one of YandereDev's employees who left for reasons we'll get into later, and he said he's apparently been working very diligently on this game since it was announced. He goes so far as to say that he works around the clock consistently for 16 hours a day and is a complete social recluse who literally hasn't left his house in half a decade.
Can you attest anything to, he's been talking about his lifestyle in these blog posts, talking about working for 16 hours a day for the past like 4 years. Do you think that's accurate?
Yeah, I can corroborate it. I mean, there was oftentimes, at least daily, like at least 3 times a day, 3 separate times in the day, him and I would get in voice chat with some of our friends, and he would usually stream himself working, and he was working, you know, and when I left the house to go to the gyms, lecture, you know, grocery shopping, you know, hang out with friends, life stuff. He would either still be in there or working on his own thing and talking to volunteers and whatnot. So that is true. And I know he hasn't left his house since June of 2019, because June of 2019 was the last anime expo he attended. And
when you say leave his house, does he mean like literally like he orders groceries, he doesn't open the door? Like what does that mean?
Well, yeah, as far as I understand, yeah, he orders food, groceries, etc. And he does not go leave the house. He just doesn't have time in his eyes.
I really doubt that YandereDev makes as an effective use of his time that this guy claims he does, but I do absolutely believe that he's an antisocial gremlin who never goes outside or interacts with humanity. When you consider the fact that he spent the last decade wasting his youth working on his Unity game and neglected developing any healthy social life or companionship, it makes perfect sense that he'd be desperate enough to lunge at the mere scent of a female. even if its presence were just a teenager through a computer screen. A few months back, some really damning evidence surfaced that put his reputation and career in turmoil, as if those things weren't already bad enough for him. This evidence included multiple screenshots and recordings which featured some pretty inappropriate sensual conversations between him and a 16-year-old e-girl. You could say technically she is the age of consent in most states and countries, but that doesn't stop it from being generally creepy and pathetic when you're a grown man as old as he is and you can't even manage to find someone in your own peer group to start a relationship with. Initially, the 16-year-old e-girl who goes by the pseudonym Jane online actually enjoyed the presence of YandereDev apparently, and entertained the idea of starting a romantic relationship with him until a no-name YouTuber named AliMCC on Discord got word of it, and insisted that the conversations they were having were very problematic for an age gap as wide as theirs, and said that his behavior resembled typical textbook grooming. So she convinced her to record every conversation and screenshot every text message she got from him from that point on so she could use that as evidence against him in the future. She also convinced her to confront him about his problematic behavior and to accuse him of grooming, which she recorded as well, which made for some of the best memeable quotes we've gotten from YandereDev yet. You have these multiple instances where YandereDev is almost trying to convince himself that what he's doing isn't wrong, using hilariously twisted logic, like trying to compartmentalize the age of consent into a percentage. Being attracted to a 17-year-old is 94.4% okay, so being attracted to a 9-year-old is 50% okay by that logic. So I guess a 10-year-old is a moral net positive, I guess. He rationalizes the relationship by talking about puberty and how it's a determining factor in sexual readiness, and that him sexualizing minors shouldn't be taboo because nature itself sexualizes minors by giving them birthing hips.
You can't sexualize minors. I mean, you can't disagree with that without sounding like a creep. There's nothing I can really say about that.
Mother Nature sexualizes minors. Puberty starts to give breasts and wide hips to children before they turn 18. It's not like, a person does it to a child. The child's own body does it to themselves. It's not like an adult can go to a child and cast a magic spell that gives them breasts. Haha, I've sexualized you. I gave you breasts. And the child is like, no. No, the child just does it. The child's body does it automatically. A child gradually becomes an adult over time because of puberty.
I really hate the coy and cringy sarcastic way that he reminds her and himself that what he's doing is morally questionable, and it almost like persuades himself into thinking that what he's doing isn't wrong by using Reddit tier irony.
Yeah, you're very skinny and that's kind of hot. Sorry, am I a bad guy for saying that? Should I go die?
No.
Am I a bad guy?
There's just something about the way he says this specific part. Should I just die? It's this quirky feminine way of speaking that goes beyond just cringe and makes me think about taking his life. You can say that he technically didn't do anything illegal, but he did skirt very close to the line of criminality by discussing the idea of her sending him videos of her undressing, which if she actually did, that would obviously be very illegal. My personal favorite moment during his cope was when he accuses her of abusing a power imbalance over him and says that he's being taken advantage of because he's just a lonely, desperate, vulnerable man, despite him being 19 years her junior. I guess this self-victimizing mental gymnastics actually seemed to work on Jane, and she was convinced that there wasn't anything unethical about her and YandereDev e-dating, and that she was actually the real villain in this love story all along. This AliMCC YouTuber was planning on releasing all the evidence she compiled from Jane over the course of a few months via YouTube and TikTok, and Jane asks her not to after having changed her mind about YandereDev, to which AliMCC ignores completely and releases anyways. The TikTok that she releases exposing the Snapchat receipts between them garners over 1 million views, and was originally responsible for kicking off the story and sending it into widespread public discussion. She looks exactly how you'd expect a gay, terminally online, Discord-dwelling autist to look like. I don't really know what has to happen in your life that gets you to the point where you think dyeing your hair like this would be a good idea. Anyways, his TikTok was released after Jane had revoked her permission to, which prompted her to post on the YandereDev subreddit defending him and is critical of Ali for sharing the screenshots and recordings without her consent. She accuses Ali of manipulating her into thinking she was a grooming victim so she can be used as a tool for her bad faith intentions, which were to character assassinate YandereDev and destroy his career. And defends YandereDev by saying she doesn't feel that she was being groomed in any way, since she was the one who originally initiated contact and recorded him illegally. Ali MCC proceeds to upload a full expose video on her YouTube channel that spans over half an hour long and includes all the most suspect moments from their Discord conversations that we mentioned previously. In this video, Ali stands by her decision to publicize the recordings without the consent of Jane because she felt that she was being manipulated by Alex Mahan's high-level speechcraft persuasion skills and that she wasn't acting out of her own autonomy.
And unfortunately, with Jane being a huge fan of Alex and being greatly infatuated with him, his coercion worked, and Jane wanted to back out and retract her allegations.
She also claims there were other victims of YandereDev that came out of the woodworks and insisted she release the video.
Not just for herself, but for other alleged victims of Alex as well, who have been in contact towards the end of the original video being put together.
Which to me just sounds like typical e-girl allegation farmers who hop on the bandwagon of whoever's being canceled for grooming that day and pretend like they're victimized for attention. It happens literally every single time someone's in hot water over accusations like this. She literally says in this video that in the rare instances she deals with e-drama about grooming, she always puts the demands of the victims first.
I was unsure if I would be posting this video at all because from the beginning I made it a priority for her to maintain full control of how her story is told at all times. That's something I pride myself on in the very few situations like this I've been involved in the past, is always putting the victim first. And so I told her throughout this entire process that if she ever changed her mind and didn't want her story to be shared, I would respect her decision. But that was if she came to that conclusion on her own, and sadly, I hadn't anticipated if someone she alleged was actively abusing her for months would push her into silence and not seeking proper help that she had so passionately wanted throughout this entire process.
But this time when it's a massive internet personality who would make for a big news headline, all of a sudden her demands are considered completely void. She's only acting in this teenage girl's best interest by publicly humiliating her and putting her extremely embarrassing e-romance sessions on blast for the entirety of the internet to hear, to the point where even her friends in high school know about it. And oh yeah, I'm sure these scenarios where Ali gets herself involved in retarded grooming drama with internet micro-celebrities on Discord is such a rare occurrence. I mean, get real. You can tell by just looking at everything about this girl that she's your typical gender-fluid Twitter autist that farms internet drama as a source of entertainment and makes it her entire personality. Jane resorted to issuing a false copyright strike against Ali's video, I guess since she was fed up with being publicly humiliated in front of millions of people, and she figured that was the only way she could prevent people from seeing it. But it was far too late. The damage was already done and the story had already reached the mainstream, and terrible, niche, indie tabloid news websites were already pumping out slop about it. The culmination of all this backlash against YandereDev led to him giving an official response in written form on his blog post, and to give him credit, he doesn't really deflect accountability onto anyone but himself and kinda takes full responsibility for the most part. Aside from the very beginning where he says something like, "My instinct is to let everyone know that the videos everyone watched of me e-romancing this teenage girl, yeah, those were edited in an extremely dishonest and bad faith manner. But I'm not gonna do that today." Like, you already conveyed the point that you just said you weren't gonna make. Now I know that you feel like the video is edited in a dishonest way. I think that was his way of defending himself and clearly stating his points of contention, while also trying to take full responsibility at the same time, which never really manages to sound good to normal people who aren't retarded. He does this again later down in the response. "My instinct is to let you know that everything was intentionally clipped out of context, and if you had the context, it wouldn't sound nearly as bad. But I'm not gonna do that today. I'm just gonna own up to this one. There's just no excuse. Not even the fact that everything was taken out of context, which I'm totally gonna refrain from telling you. I'm just gonna take full responsibility for this one." It gets ridiculous when he pretends like all the conversations he had with her that had very obvious sexual overtones were just vulgar jokes. You know, like how he would talk to one of the guys. I too like talking to my homies like this.
Yeah, you're very skinny and that's kind of hot.
Months passed since this response was given with no real follow-up, which just allowed the internet drama to really fester, and the criticism never really subsided. Not like there was anything he could have said that would have made a situation better anyways. I feel like this is probably one of the few scenarios where doubling down and being shameless actually would have caused less damage than his response did. Just the way he went about addressing the allegations was like digging his own grave and shooting himself. The response was obviously received horribly on his blog and everywhere else. I literally could not find a single comment on his post that wasn't lambasting him for his stupidity. And I guess after months of his reputation decaying into oblivion and his volunteers and employees all leaving the project, he finally felt the need to give a response where he actually tries to build a legitimate defense for himself. He uploads a video on his main YouTube channel addressing the allegations in their entirety and tying up all the loose ends that he said he wouldn't acknowledge in his written response. Which, yeah, figures. It probably wasn't the best idea to not defend yourself whatsoever from accusations that you felt were wrong. He starts off the video by bringing up a written statement made by Jane where she comes to the defense of Alex Mahan and lampoons Ali MCC for being, quote, manipulative, hateful, and an untrustworthy source of news. Apparently Jane was only engaging in the public takedown of Alex because Ali was coaching her to, and insinuates that Ali's motives were malicious and she wasn't acting for her in good faith. She was only acting in the interest of a Discord community dedicated to stalking him and bringing him down, which comes as no surprise to me as I've mentioned earlier. Again, she just looks like she spends all her time doing gay ops on Discord and farming for drama. This explains why she completely disregarded Jane's request to not upload the video, and why she intentionally clipped parts of their conversation out of context, since acting in good faith was never exactly in her priorities. Alex mentioned some of the ways that the recordings were taken out of context like this, before once again saying that he's not going to elaborate any farther because it's just not relevant to this response.
I feel like it's worth mentioning that a lot of the remarks I made only sound bad when they're out of context. For example, there was one time when the girl jokingly said, "You should make an OnlyFans." And I said, "No, that's dumb. No one would ever want to see that." And she said something like, "Come on, it's so easy to make money on OnlyFans." And when I heard that, I thought, whoa, that's a little concerning. Don't tell me that social media is brainwashing this generation to think that they should just go directly into porn the second they turn 18 because it's the best way to get rich quick. That's a little concerning. I wanted to know if she was joking or if she was being serious. So I asked her, "Are you planning to start an OnlyFans?" And of course, the YouTuber used the recording of me saying, "Are you planning to start an OnlyFans?" to frame me as someone who initiates horrifically inappropriate discussions with children, which is just completely dishonest. There's a part of me that wants to go point by point down the list of every single questionable or suspicious thing I said and provide context for absolutely everything, but that's not really the main issue here.
He spends the rest of the video pretty much just stating the obvious, like how his lack of social development is responsible for his desperation, and he should rehabilitate by touching grass and leaving his house and his computer for once in 5 years. And instead of acknowledging any of the Snapchat conversations, he instead addresses things like random screenshots that were already obviously fake, and the claim that he had been grooming Jane since she was 9, which everybody knew wasn't true. The whole video is pretty much a nothing burger where he throws himself a pity party over how lonely and desperate he is. The only thing of value that came out of this was Jane's written response, only because it had some funny bits in it. She said if anyone was doing the grooming, it was actually her, since she was the one who contacted him originally, and she was expressing a lot of attention-seeking behavior with the intention of provoking a response from him. She said she started to develop a crush on him and would try to steer the conversation into more sexual topics in order to goad him into a relationship, I guess. I don't know. I also liked how she said he only sounded really creepy because he wasn't aware of the social boundaries that surrounded minors when discussing anything sexual, because he's autistic, I guess, and self-diagnoses him with a reference sheet she found online. Not only is it because he's apparently socially inept, but it's also because of his sarcastic personality, and says he just couldn't express his sarcasm properly because written text lacks contextual tone and could be misconstrued as malicious. Their whole Snapchat log only sounds overtly sexual and creepy because it lacks tone. That's why. The statement that she wrote along with her Twitter account were later deleted, and the response video itself was later privated, supposedly at the behest of Jane, but that's not 100% confirmed. YandereDev just alluded that it was for the well-being of someone he mentioned in the video, which there's no one else it could be. I think surprisingly, if I recall correctly, the response video was actually well received, at least by the looks of the comments section, where they were commemorating him for his transparency and well-rounded explanations. That is until heavy hitter commentary channels like Moist and Mutahar started started denouncing him, then public opinion turned back against him. Generally, I feel like if the person who brought this news to light wasn't such a dishonest spurg like AliMCC is, then YandereDev wouldn't have had a way to spin the optics back into his favor. Like, I feel like if it was just a normal person who brought the evidence forward in its authentic form and didn't try to conduct gay ops and just made rational conclusions about it, then he couldn't have said anything that would have made him look better. Not that he looks good to begin with. I don't think there's any real recovery for his reputation or his career. The best thing he could probably do now is just sell his brainchild to some publisher or dev team, or else the game's just gonna go down with him. Anyways, if you made it through, please like and subscribe, leave a mean comment. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.